As many of you listeners already know, I'm a big fan of these roundtable structures and formats for the podcast. And if I had my way, I would do a roundtable every single week. It gets a little crazy trying to balance all these schedules, especially with a group of high level CEOs in our industry. But I'm very glad to say that we got Demi Horvat, Steve Davis, Matthew Loney, and David Weiss all together on this roundtable to go over what does it mean to be a hired gun in the industry. So many companies and startups in the short-term rental, hotel, hospitality category are founder led. And to have CEOs that are taking the helm, steering the ship, and going a direction beyond the founder's 0 to 1 vision, this is where we get to dive in deep and geek out and kind of figure out what is kind of happening in the pipeline now and what should companies and CEOs and founders alike start thinking about in 2024. In this conversation, you're going to hear us talk about product, team, culture, 0 to 1, venture capital, private equity, buying versus building, all the above. So without giving away the farm, I want to go ahead and just segue right into our intro and get started. So enjoy this episode. Make sure you check out the links in the show notes for all of our amazing guests that were on this podcast, as they would love to connect with you as well. So here we go in 3, 2, 1. You're listening to Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, a podcast for those who are in and around the hospitality industry who love, live, and breathe what they do. You can join us for candid and unscripted conversations with hospitality experts and founders as we go deeper into their personal stories while they're sharing their triumphs and trials that got them to where they are today. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and you're listening to an episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. Now, let's begin. All right, welcome back to another Hospitality.fm roundtable. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and I'm very excited because we are doing a bunch of different series and roundtables around different topics and themes with a collective amount of guests. And so today, I get to introduce some close friends that are in the industry who have been on the podcast many times before, or maybe a first time appearance. And we're going to go into the hired guns, or the CEOs that didn't start the business, but have come in and have kind of given the business a second breath of life. And today I'm excited to welcome my first group of panelists. So let's bring them on. Welcome, everybody. We have David Weiss from Whimstay, Matthew Loney from Xplorie, Demi Horvat from AirDNA, and of course, Steve Davis from Operto, who has been on the show probably more times than I should let him. So welcome, everybody. How are you guys doing?
Awesome.
Good, thanks.
Good.
This is a dynamic group. So I'm going to start with Matt Loney because I feel like we haven't been on the same side of the microphone in a long time, my friend. And
It's been a while.
it has been, but it's great to see your face, and it's great to have you on. So thank you for joining. I want to go in from your perspective, because when you and I first met and we had you on the podcast back in either late 2020 or early 2021, I thought you were the founder of Xplorie. So what does that mean to you when you hear from other people that are like, hey, you're not the founder, you're the CEO, you came in kind of as the ship steerer, right? And so do you ever get that comment often? And if so, how do you respond?
No, I don't really focus much on it. I think I actually take that as a compliment. I think entrepreneurs, founders are incredibly passionate people. And sometimes I think as maybe a hired gun, if you will, or the CEO comes in to steer the ship, some of that passion is lost. And again, I think that's a compliment. But it is true. It is not one of my skill sets. I think I'm amazed at the brilliance of founders that to create, that 0 to 1, if you will, is incredibly difficult, and it takes a certain skill set that I don't have. In fact, this is my third company now as a hired gun, and but I think we all have our strengths and weaknesses, and so I try to carry that same passion that our founder had, and that the founders of the other companies that I've had the opportunity to kind of steer for a while. that they've had. But it is a very different role than a founder, and it takes you a while to, I think, get your feet under you when you're coming into a company that's already got its own history. It's got its own challenges. Sometimes it's easier to start with a blank slate, and sometimes it's a little bit harder. It just depends on your perspective.
Well, I'm very curious. This is open to everybody. What were some of the challenges maybe that you expected or didn't expect when coming in as the CEO? And Matt, if you want to start, you can do that. If not, anybody who has an answer ready.
Well, I'll just take the obvious, and then I'll let the group. COVID, does that count? Fires of Maui, the fires in Tennessee, Hurricane Michael. No, I mean, those are some things that jump out to me. Just things out of our control. But I'll turn it over to the group.
Let's go to Steve. I'll pick on Steve a little bit because I got to meet Michael, who was the founder of Operto back in the day. No longer there. You came in and have taken the company completely 180, 3 acquisitions in 3 years, a big accomplishment, a lot more gray hairs than you started. So for you, was that expected? Was that not expected?
Yeah, I mean, this was my first hired gun assignment, I guess. When I was brought in.
I love that we're going with that theme, by the way.
Yeah,
we don't have to keep going for everybody. But
when I joined the company literally on day one, and I remember sitting at my desk and like all the acronyms are flying around the room. It's like PMS and OTAs and like all this RevPAR, and I'm sitting there. I'm literally got Google open and I'm Googling OTA. And then my boss is like the ex-CEO of booking.com. So I walk into his room, I'm like, what's an OTA? And he's like, sit down, my son, so I really started from zero. And I think that, the one thing you get, I think that, whether it's a PE firm or the founders looking for sort of a CEO in succession, is you get you truly do get a fresh set of eyes, right? Someone who comes in and doesn't know anything about anything. We're lucky in our space, I think, because it's really, really small. So I felt within maybe 3 months that I knew 90% of the people that I needed to know in the space after 3 or 4 shows, right? So that was good. So I think that the ramping time was slow. Or so it was quick, but what I think the one downfall that you do go through when you're you're brought in and the company might have gone from 0 to 1, and you need to take it from 1 to 10 because there's a VC behind it. Is it's hard to take the original team and to get them refocused on a different trajectory. And so sometimes what you see is you do have some folks who might start quiet quitting on you, might not be signed up for the next part of the journey. Then you get the people that are. And so it's really trying to find out who is the team that you're going to because you're basically taking a school bus and then you're moving it to another school bus, and you got to figure out who's going to get a ticket on that next bus. Right. And so that for me was kind of the hardest part, was kind of sifting through the weeds there. But as soon as you get people aligned, I mean, it's they rally and it's go time. And our space is super exciting. So who wouldn't want to kind of work in it, right?
Totally agree. And David, I kind of want to move to you now in a similar retrospect, because it's interesting. I remember hearing of Whimstay prior to you joining, and then I saw the announcement through Alex that you guys joined. You guys were raising a little bit of capital. So give me that expectation. Did you kind of know what you were getting into when joining Whimstay?
Well, I met Ben totally by chance in January of 2022. It had nothing to do with the business. And over the course of the next several months, we actually developed a relationship where we were just talking about the business. And that evolved through 2022 into talking about what we might be actually able to do with the business together. And that led to me being hired as COO in August of 22. And then I became the CEO in January of last year. And so we actually had a lot of time talking about the degree of difficulty of how hard a business it is that he had started, that now I am a part of, and really kind of understanding the challenges. And so we set pretty ambitious goals, starting in January last year, relating to how we're going to enhance the value prop and broaden the product offering. And we're going to pull a 180 on marketing strategy, and we're going to grow revenue 3.5 times cost effectively. What was unexpected for us And what we didn't forecast was ADR to be down 18%, and average booking value to be down 25%, and average length of stay down 8%. This is in our portfolio relative to 2022. And so we had to make some changes. And I think, Steve, you had mentioned this. A lot of aspects of what we were doing were different. Ben was the founder, and he built an amazing company with a foundational product and go-to-market strategy. But we decided, and then I decided to do things differently. And we ultimately got there. We had to make some adaptations during the year together. But I'm so grateful for the partnership we have with him. He's made it easy for me and the team from a transitional standpoint. But it was really important that, I think to some degree, we're kind of all hired to accelerate the commercialization of the business, from product development through to value creation and liquidity for shareholders. And he's just made it really easy for me. And we had a great team, as many of you know, and I'm excited for what's to come.
All right, interrupting the roundtable here. We had an amazing hour, but I want to give a shout out to our sponsors at Hostfully and Hudson Creative Studio. We talk about product. We talk about a lot of these things in this roundtable, but when it comes to product and design, it needs to really work. And what I love about Hostfully, it works for the operators. And what I love about Hudson Creative Studio, not only does it also work for the operators, it works for your guests. When they are booking direct on your website, the booking engine is clean, slick, and smooth. Love it. Hostfully, I can't complain. They have so many updates and features, their mobile app to their calendar synchronization to the marketplace, all the above. It just really works and is easy to use. Once you figure out the little nuances of workflows and all the other things, you should have no issues. And their onboarding is great. So, for all of our Slick Talkers, grab the links in the show notes, sign up for them today. Make sure that you let them know that we'll send you, and back to the roundtable. I love that. And, going into now Demi, I think, you kind of had a similar expectation too, right? You were COO before getting the CEO role. So you kind of knew what you're getting into. You saw behind the scenes, you know what's going on in the business. You weren't like Steve, who was like Googling OTAs and RevPARs on the first day. So were there anything, like, from your point of view, that you expected that did go the way you expected? Like, that was like you knew going in and it stayed that way.
Yeah, so I promise I was also Googling things on my first few days. But I would say the moving into the COO role before taking on the CEO role was super, super helpful for me, because I was also coming in from outside of the industry. So having that time to kind of get up to speed, not only on the business and on the AirDNA team, but also learning the industry, starting to get those industry connections, meeting people at all the conferences, was incredibly valuable. And others have kind of said this as well, but I think for me, it was also incredibly helpful to have the partnership that Scott and I developed, where having him in my corner, having him kind of be bought into me as the future leader and setting that tone with the rest of the team was really helpful. And he helped me learn the business. He kind of told me what I needed to know, taught me who I needed to meet, and gave me the kind of good, bad, and ugly. Not that there was a lot of ugly, to be clear, but that was super, super helpful for me. And then I would say it also opened up the opportunity for me to basically focus my first few months on listening and really learning, rather than being in that leadership role and needing to make changes and set the direction. So for me, that foundational time to be able to kind of endeavor to listen and endeavor to understand, rather than coming in and saying, we're going to change this, that, and the other, was really useful to build relationships with the team.
I love that. And to go with the or the hired gun theme, I guess, like not being guns blazing on your first day, is probably a good thing to earn trust and build culture, which we'll get to in this roundtable. I took a couple notes while you guys have all been talking, because there's been a couple things that popped up that maybe I didn't pre-plan for, and we'll get to throughout this roundtable discussion around, going from 1 to 10 instead of 0 to 1, and then also around working with investors or a board, versus someone like me who's completely 100% bootstrapped and has no one to answer to except for myself. I would love to hear some advice around that, because I think it's something a lot of founders in our industry, this industry is very founder heavy, right? A lot of the companies, it was hard to find you guys for me to grab this round table, to be honest. Like, I knew Steve, I knew Demi, then forgot Matt was not the founder. So I was like, oh yeah, should have probably Matt, and then David. So like it took a while. There's a lot more founders than there are CEOs. So to go into something that I wanted to segue into, I'm really passionate about this year. especially on this like podcast and in our discussions, is design and tech and the way that the product is shipped. So the way, like, one reason why I'm glad all four of you are on this is because I admire the product and the design and the functionality. I think Whimstay is well put together, it's well designed. If you're comparing it to other OTAs, it honestly does compete and beat a lot of the best. Like, I've used it, I've seen it as a guest and as a host. So like really admire that. And Xplorie, the same thing. Like, you guys' technology and the way you guys have pretty much encompassed the whole management ecosystem for your clients is super admirable. Demi with AirDNA, like the things that you guys have done and the product that you guys have continuously updated. Operto, I'm a customer. I love the ecosystem that we get to have. So all great products, right? Like, I can praise you guys this whole roundtable, which I won't, because then, I'd have to send you my invoice later. But basically is like, I find design in our industry, especially on the technology side, to be kind of rough. Like, it's very rare to find good companies that have good tech with good design. And so I'm curious for your guys' perspective, what does your tech stack look like? Because I don't think a lot of operators or maybe other people in the industry understand that a tech company has a tech stack. It's not just a bunch of coders, coding things. And then I also am very curious around, you know, if the tech is great but the design is bad, then basically your tech is bad because the user experience using your tech sucked. And I think, that overall to the manager is what matters. If they can't use you, then there's no point of having the tool. So I'm very curious on how you guys all see product design and the technology function. So I'll let anyone take the floor, and if no one grabs it, then I'll just start bullying one of you at a time.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we've gone through this pain for, I think that was probably one of the biggest pains when I joined, and sort of things that we looked at was, how do we make our products better? I mean, it was, I think that back in the day, very sort of this pre-COVID, very bootstrapped cowboy coding. You're just like, people would just buy from you because there was limited competition. There wasn't a lot of choice. It was pretty cheap, and people had to do something to automate their businesses. But as we kind of progressed and coming out of COVID, that hall pass kind of went away, and so now we got new competition. You've got more of a savvy buyer, and you've also got like professional managers who like really appreciate good design, because at the end of the day, like, they're not necessarily a super tech forward user anyways. And then especially like in our space where we've got like, a cleaning and housekeeping and maintenance module, like you're looking at sort of a very unsophisticated end user potentially that you need to be able to design great product for, so that they can use it to do the things that it was intended to do. So, I think we've seen, like, in our business for sure, a huge shift on the UX side around, like, we have to build products that are not only like high impact, but they are super usable. And we got punished for that quite badly, and we've put a lot of sort of time and treasure into figuring that out for our customers, because it's really important.
Yeah, what about you, Demi? You said it looks like you have some thoughts and ideas, so would love to hear from you as well.
I do. Yeah, time and treasure definitely resonates. But I would say, I think it's pretty common that a founder-led bootstrapped business has the founder as the product visionary kind of decision maker as to what we're going to build and how it should look. And I think one of the really critical pieces of our role is recognizing at what stage of a business that doesn't work anymore, when you really need to scale. So one of the things that we did pretty early on, and one of my first hires that I brought on, was a chief product officer, recognizing that it would be super useful with the kind of aspirations that we had for the business to have someone who's a professional leader with a long career in product and engineering to be able to put in the structures and processes and technology that we would need in order to accomplish some of the things that we had big aspirations to do. So I think the product redesign that we launched last year, which was kind of full facelift to the entire platform, changing the way that our subscriptions worked, changing and having kind of a design first mentality, was all made possible first by bringing on the right talent that was going to be able to kind of bring everything together, hire the product managers and hire the engineers that we would need in order to execute on it. And we couldn't have done it if we hadn't brought in that leader first.
Yeah, Will, one thing though that I think is important, especially for founders out there, is, and I would guess it's true of all 4 companies. I know it is of Xplorie, though. I think the great companies, that's the progression, right? Because the original product had a market fit. It was clunky, but it was solving a problem in our industry, and then it got prettier. The UX, the UI. Not going to throw anyone under the bus, but I do think what we've seen a little bit since our industry has boomed has been some companies have tried to flip that on its head and designed really pretty products, but I'm not sure what problem they're really solving or if that's really a problem in the industry. So I do think it's important that while, yes, it is very tough to get adoption if your tech is hard to use. It's even harder to get adoption if your tech doesn't solve a problem that, or at least it doesn't solve a problem in the eyes of your user, right? That's not a problem, or it's not something that they lay in bed at night or they're losing hours to. So I think to some extent, designing pretty, really usable tech, less clicks to get to certain places is a privilege of companies that first figured out, how do I solve problems that people are facing? So it's just a perspective on that.
Oh, I love that. I love that. David, any comments from your side?
Yeah, well, I would say, we're an OTA. And so half of our marketplace is consumers facing and half of our marketplace is business facing. And so there's no such thing in our world as great tech and bad design. If it's bad design, it's bad tech, full stop. And so now we're super, super early in our progression of what we're doing. But the way we've approached it is that someone at some point said self-awareness is the first step towards enlightenment. And we have a group of things that we need to build that will make us different and better than the competition. The list of things that we don't do well relative to the competition, we got to figure out how we do that, tech stack, front end, all of the components that we need to do it. And so we focus our energy. Demi, you mentioned around, do we have the people in the building to do what we need to do? And do we have also the right people in the building to make the right decisions on the infrastructure to support it? And so we have our whole company across functions, not just engineering, of let's all be able to say the same thing on what makes us better, what makes us different. We all have a part in it. The product development team has a part, the engineering team has a part, the customer service team has a part, the account management team has a part, the risk management team has a part, and the sales and business development team have a part. But it's the focus of the team is really on those things that we do really well. It's a smaller list. And then it's also up to us to kind of figure out how we provide the infrastructure to support it.
All very well said. And I'm curious, just out of hearing all of you guys talk about this, was product design or the product itself a decision maker before any of you decided to join the companies that you're at? Did you get to play around with the tools? Did you ask customers? Did you talk to team? Anybody go through like any type of product vetting process?
Well, one thing I would say, the company's been around, and my experience, it sounds like, is a little bit different than Matt, your experience or Demi's experience is. I had 7 or 8 years of really relevant experience in a former life that was really relevant to what Ben was building. And so we brought together kind of a complementary skill set in that regard. And so early on, we actually had a really constructive discussion about the product, what it was doing, what it wasn't doing, what we did over here, what the other folks did over here that didn't work, what these other folks did over here that really did work, and tried to take both his experience as a founder and building this kind of amazing foundational thing, and then understanding what in this former case, HomeAway and Verbo did, along with processing claimants for thousands of property vacation rental property managers. And so we started having that discussion before I even joined the company, and I think it helped kind of kickstart what we were doing initially because of that.
I mean, on my side, I would say I'm actually glad I didn't play with the product before I joined, because I probably wouldn't have. I did. I'd say that tongue in cheek. For me, and I think this goes back to Matt's point earlier, is it's far more important that the company has product market fit than you've got some Lamborghini that has no engine in it, right? Like it comes down to that. Like you can make anything pretty. There's lots of amazing UX folk out there, but if there's no engine, there's no engine. And so, for me, that was the most critical piece, was like, does this company have, like, is it scratching someone's itch out there? And are there enough people with the same itch that I can go and find them all? That was the decision-making criteria. And I was like, oh my God, like this massive market with really bad tech, and it's so underserved. And we are selling picks and shovels to the next gold rush. Like, let's go. And that was for me, was like, I didn't care what it looked like, because you can always make it look better, but you can't find a product market fit until you really have it. And that was critical.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Couldn't have said it better. And I think when you can identify that there's a clear need and there are things in the product that don't look very good, I think that actually screams opportunity. So one of the things for me that appealed about AirDNA is, I think a lot of people, when they're thinking of AirDNA, are thinking of the subscription platform where you can subscribe to different levels of the software product. But one of the things that jumped out to me when I was joining was we had an enterprise business where we were selling CSV files, so Excel files to various enterprise customer types. And I think that's an amazing example of, the product is clearly not what customers want and is clearly not what they would expect. They're expecting software, they're expecting something sleek and amazing, but they're willing to pay for something that's a CSV file with the information that they need. So to me, that was just an absolute flashing light of opportunity, that if we could build a sleeker product, the need was there and the demand was there, and that we could be successful doing that.
For sure.
Yeah. Will, for me, because I think I'm the only one on here, we're definitely a lot less of a true SaaS product than the other three on here, right? We're more of when we're honest with ourselves, right, and we look in the mirror, we're a heavy tech enabled business. And so I had the benefit of, we didn't have any tech, like zero, and it was working. Right now, we were in like 3 markets, and but yet it was still working. And it was more about, okay, what type of tech, how do we build tech to enable this to really scale? And I think everybody here would probably agree that's not that uncommon when you look at founder-led businesses, right? They've proven out that product market fit, and it's groups like people like this, whose job it is to come in and go, okay, I've never come into a company that's got, oh yeah, we got all the systems and processes, like they're all documented over there. Like there's no, but you don't expect that in a founder-led company, right? Again, they've figured out the product market fit. It's this team's job, right, to go, okay, how do you scale it? And so that was more of my interest, was, okay, can you build tech around this to really scale it? And there's some great companies that are built that just simply aren't scalable. And I think too, you gotta be honest when you look at that, which is, does this really grow? Not everything grows with tech. There's some property management companies, I think, that may starting to figure that, like, just because you build tech around it doesn't make it instantly scalable. And so you got to be careful there too.
A really, really good point. And Kelsey behind the scenes will tell you for sure there's no systems or processes behind the scenes of a founder-led company, where it's just a lot of Slack messages. But I actually do have a question for you, Matt, because with Xplorie, I do know you guys have a hardware and a software component. Most of the hardware, I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, we can always take this out of post-production, but most of the hardware is not Xplorie hardware. It's either powered by like Amazon Alexa. So how do you guys go about when it's not your hardware that you can control? I've listened on other podcasts, like great software is powered, or not great software, sorry, great hardware is only great when it's powered by great software. So how does Xplorie approach that when it comes to the software and hardware component, especially when it's not your hardware built in-house?
Yeah, we really view the hardware as as the delivery mechanism of the software. And we've been very careful. We've got a great partnership with Amazon and their Alexa product, but we've been very careful and very strategic in building software that is agnostic to the hardware, or at least can be if we need it to be. And so you've got to be careful there. We don't want to get into the hardware game. That's another thing that I think, being a hired gun, part of your job is to figure out, almost more importantly, is who do we not want to be when we grow up? A lot of people focus on who do we want to be, but the more important question sometimes is who do we not want to be? And we certainly don't want to be a hardware company. And so, we've kind of developed that, but we've developed it from the standpoint of, what do we do if our hardware supplier, goes away, or if there's a better hardware supplier out there that fulfills the needs of what we're trying to do in a better way. So I think you just have to be, careful as you're starting to scale. You're still a startup, and you got to be nimble, and you've got to understand that the ground under you is still not, it's not real steady, and that's okay. You're the person whose job it is to get it from point A to point B. I've told people, if I'm here when Xplorie's 3 times the size of today, Xplorie's probably not. I'm probably not the right person for that job, right? Because when that's managing that company is very different than managing the company we are today, which is very different than being founder led. So it's just kind of how we think about it.
All right. And now Matthew, Loney, and I just mentioned, hardware versus software. And in a recent episode with Nils, the founder of Minute, we talked about the same thing. Hardware should really only be great because it has great software backing it. The hardware powers and enhances the software. If you have great hardware but bad software, then overall the tech is not great. And Nils and I talked about this, but we also talk about it here in this roundtable. And the thing I love about Minute is that the software is really great. The hardware is really great. It's reliable. It's consistent. It doesn't break. And Minute does it well. Most companies can't do both. So when they have such a great software like Minute does, you have everything at your fingertips on your mobile phone. Whether you're a in operation market, like where you operate in this destination and you have density there, or if you're remote like our company at Recreation Rentals, we definitely depend on Minute and love the ease and access it gives us. So get 2 months for free in the link in the show notes and let them know that we'll send you. And of course, back to the roundtable.
Yeah, I think on our side, I mean, we are the hardware connector guys, right? I mean, that's our business. And so, just to reiterate what Matt just said, I mean, we spend a lot of time and effort on cultivating amazing relationships with our hardware suppliers, but we do not want to touch it. I mean, like literally, I remember having phone calls when we were raising our B round, and you go through a lot of calls, right? And it was early on, and I put on one of our one of our slides, like, oh yeah, and maybe like down the road, maybe we'll get into the hardware game. Anyways, I get to the end of the thing, and the guy's like, I'm going to give you a piece of advice right now. He's like, if you're trying to raise venture money and you put even the word hardware into your deck, you'd literally disqualify yourself from all of Silicon Valley, all of New York. He's like, no one will touch you with a barge pole. And so he said, where you're sitting in between the user and the hardware guys, he's like, stay in that lane and figure out how to make that 2-lane highway you're on a 6-lane highway, but do not touch it. And so I obviously took that to heart and then killed the slide. And then, and I kind of knew that already, but it was really quite eye-opening to see not only from the venture side, how they were to anyone touching hardware, but it's a really difficult game. And software and hardware, yes, they work together, but man, is that diametrically opposed businesses. And so we've been very, very careful to not go there.
No, I figured you would be the other person to chime in because I know you guys aren't hardware. As we were at STR Wealth, I was telling everybody that came by your booth, like, oh, they're not a hardware company. They're a software.
Yeah,
They're going to connect you. But people still didn't get it. Sometimes I had to explain to one guy, I'm like, these locks do not go to Operto. These are Yale. This is August. This is not Operto. They just connect.
yeah,
He,
for
yeah,
sure.
it took a while to
Yeah.
connect, but um, I'm very curious. This is going to segue. Like, I wanted to go into like what you guys thought about the landscape of our industry when it comes to tech. But for the sake of time, I want to move on to another piece. And Steve, I think you kind of mentioned it perfectly. I know of obviously AirDNA, Operto have made acquisitions in the last year, last 2 years, hell, last month and a half. Um, I don't know about Xplorie and Whimstay, but I'm curious for all of you, anyone who wants to chime in, how do you know when to build a product or to buy?
Demi?
Steve, you laughed. One of you guys can take it.
Happy to go. We're
Go for it.
a little bit earlier, and so I'll echo back to kind of comments I made earlier. It's really simple. We for us, which is to say that focus on what we do better and different needs to be scaled to a point. We need to have a certain market presence and a certain number of integrations and properties and all these things before we would think about buying something else. And also, we feel really lucky in the fact that we think we've been identified a really large segment of the market that was unserved. And so now it's really kind of incumbent on us to go kind of serve that market before that we would start to think about that part of the equation, which probably comes down the road more so, someone looking at our type of company versus vice versa, given how the OTA landscape is set up.
Yeah, I was gonna say you have a very interesting business, David. So like not interesting business like you are an OTA as you stated, but that world is it's so different because like there's not a lot of M&A in my opinion. There's a lot of capital raising, but not a lot of M&A
Yeah, and
currently.
the businesses themselves have been built up through acquisition over time. And what was most interesting to me and still is that if you're whether you're a property manager or a property owner, that property is priced differently on every platform based upon the guest service fees that are charged and the commissions that are charged and everything else involved with which OTAs allows which host fees on which site, which are very different. And so it's kind of created this dynamic to attempt to create something new, and that's what we're doing.
I love that. And Demi, I would love to hear your thoughts because obviously the recent acquisition of Uplisting, which we got to cover on Good Morning Hospitality. Anyone watching or listening, link in the show notes as always. But yeah, Demi, go ahead and give me your thoughts on build or buy.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's definitely something that comes up every time we're making an acquisition. And at this point, we've done it twice. But I think when you're in our seat thinking about what you think would be really additive for your business, I think first and foremost, you want to make sure that you're having that conversation and really being strategic about whether something would push the envelope for your business and is something that really makes strategic sense for you to either build or buy. I think the build versus buy question to me comes down to a couple things. One is speed. So, can we wait and build this in house, or is it something that we think would accelerate our business so much that an acquisition would actually take us 3 years further down our path if we could find the right business to buy? The second piece is opportunity. Not every business is for sale. So even if a category or product feature or platform is something that would be useful, you might just, when you're mapping the market, identify there's not somebody who we could buy based on the valuations of these businesses, based on whether founders want to kind of get to the next round of funding or take the business to a certain level. So even if you want a business, it's not necessarily something that you can get for the right price. And then the last thing for me is really right to win. So I think when we were thinking about some of our acquisitions and potential acquisitions, when I'm thinking about things that our team could build, I want to make sure that if we're getting into something that's adjacent to what our core competency is, I think we have the right team in place and the right talent and the right expertise that if we were to build it ourselves, we can win. So one of the advantages to buying in that situation is you're bringing on the talent and the expertise and the relationships, and that has a ton of value as well. So if we wanted to build something that's really specialized or where those relationships are really critical and already established, that would have me lean a little bit towards buy rather than build.
Yeah, I think Demi and Steve probably, they have a lot more to contribute to this probably than I do. But I will say, here's my first rule about buy versus build. Do not listen to your engineers, because they will never buy anything. Like, they can always build it and it'll just take 6 months, because that's what they are, right? They don't want to hear that we would need to go out and buy someone else's tech. Oh, I can just build that. And so you got to be careful, because it's always going to cost more than they think. And they say that from a place of love, I think. But and you want some arrogance with your engineers, but you have to be careful. But the other thing I will say from past experiences, not Xplorie, is I think people often underestimate the difficulty of merging cultures. So, and I totally agree with David, like, it usually comes down to a speed question. How long would this take us, right? And how much would it cost? And then what's that value of money today if we could have it right now? But there is, just because you then own it today, doesn't mean it immediately is, integrated with your current tech. You got to take into account how long that's going to take. How much tech debt does that other group have? Sometimes, you do your best due diligence, but there's always rocks that don't get turned over, and you later come in and you go, oh my God, we bought that and now we have to deal with that. So I think that is often, that would be the one warning I would have, is just, you got to do really good due diligence. I think that's where PE-backed groups have an advantage, because they can turn that over to their PE group, and they don't have to then consume the day-to-day of your operational people that are keeping the existing tech moving in the right direction. They can run with it, and you can come in at the end. So just be careful there, because it is, if you haven't figured out what your own culture is and what that mission is and everything else, bringing in more people and adding on more things isn't going to just solve that problem.
Yeah, very well said.
I mean, we've been on a bit of a buying spree, I guess. From where I sit, it's totally. Our market is moving so fast. Okay. And for us, when we look at Guesty, Hostaway, like, some of these guys are raising insane amounts of money for two reasons. One reason is to acquire companies, and then probably to IPO, right? And so for us, it's a speed game now. It is, who are the folks who are going to struggle to pick up funding but have built amazing tech? And like, sometimes for me, it's like, we could have probably built DAC in 9 to 12 months. We don't have 9 to 12 months. So we bought them, right? Like, it was not a huge amount of time, like, holistically, but it just made sense for us in terms of where we need to get our product to right now, so that we can enter the markets that we want to be entering, and to sort of serve our customer base. So that really, for me, comes into it. I think merging of cultures for sure is a big thing. Obviously, we picked up a company in Spain, right? I mean, talk about different cultures from Canada to, the interior of Spain. So that, like, lots of challenges there, but like, everything takes a couple years, but it's all gotten really well now. But for me, I think, especially in short-term rentals, it's like, what it looks like right now is not what it's going to look like in February of 2025. And you're going to see a ton of M&A this year, tons. I mean, like, I've got 3 or 4 that have already hit my desk, like, in the last 2 days, plus people looking to put money in, plus, like, there's just, like, the market is really picking up right now. And so for me, the one thing that we as CEOs, whether you're a founder or you're hired or whatever, is you don't have the luxury necessarily right now of time, because I think that things are moving at such a clip now that it's a land grab, but it's not like, I think it's an important time to be making moves. And that's kind of my approach to it.
Very well said. Any other comments before we move on to that next set? I couldn't agree more with all the things you guys said. It's pretty interesting. So this wasn't kind of like my planned script, but it's been mentioned a couple of times on this roundtable. So it's kind of a two-parter. We might just need to separate it into two completely different questions. But you guys have all mentioned, 0 to 1, right? And 1 to 10. So I definitely know I am a 0 to 1 founder. I am trying to become a 1 to 2. Still really hard for me. I'm better at starting things than I am scaling them. What advice do you have for founders out there that are trying to either A, find a CEO and a hired gun, or B, get out of that phase of the 0 to 1 and kind of push their limits into that 2, 3, or 4?
I mean, I would say, just to kind of, from my own experience, I think it's much, once you get outside capital into the business, it fundamentally changes forever. Like it will never be the same again, whether that's PE money, whether that's VC money, whether that's, doesn't matter. Once an agenda comes into the boardroom with like, we've got a 7-year fund, we got to, like, this is where we're at, these are the expectations, la 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 la, like, it changes your business. And so I think that, like, the one thing I would just caution, or also like just make sure that everyone understands, is that, if you feel like the next thing that you need is capital to grow your business, then by all means go down that road. I think the longer you can bootstrap and the bigger you can get without taking that injection of capital, I think it gives you more optionality down the road for whether you just bring in someone who's from industry, whether you like there's just so many options on the table. Don't be so quick to take that money, because sometimes it's a good thing to hold off.
Well, question, this is open to everybody. This could also go to Steve, anybody. But does 1 to 0 or 1 to 10, sorry, does that mean you have to take outside capital, or is there a scenario that involves just bootstrapping all the way?
Well, we're in a situation, we haven't raised institutional capital yet. And so we're going to see how this goes. We're growing the business. There are lots of directions that we can take the business, particularly in this market environment. The advice I give to myself is go as long as you possibly can to grow the business without that. Right now, we already have a founder and a new person in. And so it just makes our dynamic obviously a lot easier, but it also just makes the decision-making in general, as long as we do have enough capital to fund what we want to do. So our objective is to, go as long as we can in that regard. It provides tremendous flexibility, but I'll also say too, that partnership is so critical. It sounds like we all have really good experiences in that regard. You could also go the other way. And I've seen it go the other way in many different cases. And so whatever time is required to bake the partnership that Demi's built and the rest of the team has built, without that, there's really nothing at all. And so the best advice I would give to folks is, to the extent that it's possible, spend however much time as you possibly can to make sure that you think alike, that you understand roles and responsibilities, who's going to do what to who, and you think about strategy and outcomes too. We have a lot of conversations internally, even though I'm not the founder, that really were you to kind of be a fly on the wall. It sounds a lot more like a partnership than it does, an at-will employee talking with the founder and controlling shareholder.
In terms of the advice that I would give a founder, I think a founder who is motivated and genuinely wants to grow and be there beyond 0 to 1, from 1 to 10, I think it's the mindset and the willingness to kind of be humble and recognize these are the things that I'm strong at and these are my areas of weakness. And so I think if someone has that motivation and can take the fact that it's going to be really hard and require growth in areas of weakness, or bringing in other people who have strengths in those areas, I think people can make it work. And I think the two things that I would recommend people think about is, one, getting a CEO coach, because I think it's really difficult to do that on your own and to see your own blind spots. And I think getting that feedback from your team, having a coach help you incorporate it and figure out what you can actually do to make those changes, is probably smart, and probably something you should do before someone else tells you that you should, because I think that's a sign of a problem. And then the other thing is, I ask myself this, and I think it applies even when you're the founder of a startup, but what is going to break in the business when we're double the size? And what is going to break in me as a leader when we're double the size? what is the thing that I'm going to need to work on, or that is going to be the most challenging for me if we were to have triple the number of customers or double the number of employees. And I think thinking about that before it becomes a problem gives you time to kind of get to the point that you would need to be in order to be successful and lead a team in a business of that scale.
Yeah, Will, you asked, do you have to raise capital? I think it depends on what success looks like to you, right? Because I do believe what Steve said is rightly, at some point, I mean, this industry right now is moving so fast, right? If Whimstay wants to become the Airbnb of last minute rentals, right? I'm going to tell you that's going to take outside capital. It just, like, you're not going to bootstrap to get to that size. But I also think that right now in this industry and in a lot of industry, like, growth is seen as success, and you got to be really careful with that. Some of our most successful partners manage 250 units, not because they couldn't manage 500, but because they figured out that, you know what, we can make about as much money managing the right 250 than 500, and my life's a lot better. And what I measure, like, my definition of success is this, and that. Like, you can get to that level, so I do think it's, all these answers have been around honesty with yourself. And as a founder, I think sometimes that's difficult because, you've kind of taken on the world by yourself at one point there. That's the definition, right? You were by yourself taking on the world. And then you've got to start to then understand, okay, I need help here. I need help here. Now I need outside capital. And frankly, I'm sure there's people much better than me, but most people, that takes outside people to help them see that. As good as you can be, and really, being honest with yourself, like, you need some outside opinions on, hey, would I be good at this? Right? Could I do this? And so, I just think you've got to have those tough conversations when you're sitting in an airplane or a hotel room and you're all by yourself. Those are the times to kind of have them.
And there's different forms of capital. It doesn't necessarily need to be a traditional venture capital investor. There's lots of different ways that certain companies are able to achieve the same end, but still maintain a little bit more operational and financial flexibility than they might otherwise with a different type of investor set.
Love that. Well, these are all great answers, and I want to be respectful of time. But one question I did really want to ask and kind of get all of your guys' thoughts, because I know I feel like I'm a lot closer to obviously Steve and Demi in the sense of I've had you guys on multiple times. Steve way too much, as I said in the beginning, but like in general, I know you guys very, very well. Matt, I haven't talked to you in quite a while, but like always, I'm watching from afar. David, I'm an admirer from afar as well. First time getting to have you in a virtual setting when we were supposed to meet at STR Wealth, but next time we'll get it. It's all good. But I'm just, one of the things we're an all remote team. Hospitality FM is all remote. Austin, Texas, LA, San Diego, Denver, you name it. We're spread. How do you guys look at culture? And I know there's a lot of founders and CEOs watching right now on LinkedIn. I'm seeing a couple people chime in here, so we'll hopefully get to questions if anyone has them. But when it comes to culture and, there's full in-office, which Steve, I know you guys have that in Vancouver. You have an in-office scenario, hybrid, schedule, maybe one day a week. But then there's hybrid and then there's fully remote like us. How do you guys manage culture and leading the team, especially when you're not the founder? And any advice for anyone listening and tuning in when it comes to this kind of, new age of remote work and potentially commercial real estate going out? It's kind of crazy, right? So we'll have anyone's thoughts.
I mean, for us, we've gone to a fairly in-office routine, to be honest. I mean, the expectation, we've got a nice, you being here before, and we've got a great office downtown, like all the amenities, all the trimmings, all the things you'd want. But where I think we've found our greatest success is that when people are in the same room on a whiteboard, they're more effective than they are through a computer screen. And I would challenge anyone to prove me wrong. I think, there's something about having that human connection and that actual, where people are like, yeah, you're physically there. Now I do think that there's a time and place for remote work for sure, but for us, and also when I look at the average age and sort of experience of our team, we've got a younger team. And so I think for a lot of folks, it's their first, second, third job coming out of college or whatever. And so having that closeness to leadership. I mean, I'm sitting in my office right now, my door's open 24/7. Like the co-op student that's here this semester could walk in and just start talking. Like there's something to be said about the accessibility and availability of leadership, being in the vicinity of people who are sort of your engine room. And so we've taken we trust everyone. They can work from home, but there's just a general acceptance that our best work has always come when we're together as a group. And that's not always possible. We do have remote people in the US and all over, but for the most part, like 80% of our team's here in Vancouver, and I probably see 80% of those people 4 days a week.
I love what Steve just said. So I will tell you, there is no question that companies are better in person. Like it is, you cannot, when it comes to strategy, when it comes to, developing culture, it does not, like Steve said, you can't, I'd love someone to prove me wrong. And I think the CEOs that are out there saying, oh, we're doing, just as strong a work fully remote as we were, they're lying, and they're doing it because they know that they need to get. Now, here's what I'm also going to say.
They're doing it from a chairlift somewhere, Matt, because they're taking the day off.
That's right. Pay no attention. I haven't been to the office in 4 months. Now, that being said, though, let me be clear. Xplorie is almost fully remote. Here's why. I also know when I'm in a fight that I can't win. And right now, we're based in Destin, Florida. I struggled before COVID to get talent, the talent I needed to go out and compete. And really, at this stage, it's all about the people, because you're still so early on. The people are going to make or break you. And so what we realized was, what I've realized is, okay, I'm not going to win that. So I'm not going to go out and die on that sword. But I do want to make it clear. Like if anybody asks me, we are better if I had my entire team in one single building 5 days a week, not 4, 5 days a week, not hybrid. It's just how I feel. So then the question goes, okay, if you're not going to go out and fight that fight, then what do you do? And I think that's still, people are trying to figure it out. A bunch of people are probably going to laugh at me. We have tested now, and we're continuing to test VR. And I will tell you that I think it is 70% of in-person, 75 if I put Zoom and Google Meet at 50. So I've got right over here, I'm sitting in the Atlanta airport. As soon as this is done, I'm going to put on the massive goggles. You guys are going to laugh. And we're in there in Avatar, sitting across a conference room table. I've got 15 employees. But we're trying to figure it out, because I've got to have the talent, but I can't lose the, what Steve's talking about, that energy, just the back and forth that happens. And so I think technology is going to help us get there. I don't think we'll ever go back to fully in office. But I also don't think we should, as CEOs, we're doing all of our industries a disservice by sticking our head in the sand and going, no, we're just as good remote, because I just don't believe it to be true.
Mm-hmm. Anybody have a counter? Yeah, David, I would love to.
I mean, same. I mean, I agree with everything that Steve and Matt, you just said. You just can't replicate it, particularly at our stage. The learning, the teaching, the iteration, the ideation that's required. And when you talk about culture, we're gonna have a 60-minute meeting on product launch of X. The culture stuff happens after and before the meeting, typically. And so, at least in my experience. Now, having said that, we have 95% of our engineering team offshore. This goes back to, okay, I start from the place of what's best for the business at this point. And I kind of, agree with what you said, Matt. Like there's no alternative at the moment for us, because we're doing what's in the best interest of the business. But I could see clearly the stuff that we're missing. and the gaps that we have as a result of what we're doing here. And it's just, for us, it's just more a question of timing and scale and size to get to a place where, and it doesn't need to be everyone, but there's no question that a certain number of people need to get, in my opinion, need to be together a certain amount of time for what we're doing, and particularly at our stage where we don't have, I think someone mentioned earlier, we don't have all the this is how we do things at Whimstay, and we have the processes documented, and this is what we do. That, like, we're making that stuff up. We're documenting that stuff as we go as well, and that it makes it harder when people aren't in the same room.
Yeah, I struggle with it personally. Like, my whole team is, like I said, is remote. I wish we were in Denver or, whatever, more often, because I do see when we're at a conference, that collaboration, that energy, you just can't beat it. Like, I come home and I'm like, dang, I look at office space. I'm like, should I get an office and like fly everybody out once a month? I don't know. But Demi, you have an interesting situation. You're in New York. You have an office here in Denver. I love getting to visit the people, especially when you're in town. You and Jamie Lane, my favorite people to see and visit. But would love to know, like, how does that work for you guys, especially with an office in Spain, and of course trying to respect everyone's time. But this is something I think a lot of people are struggling with in our industry specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to take a slightly counterpoint to the rest of the group. I agree. I love the in-person time. And I think the whiteboarding, kind of ideation, brainstorming, culture building, social stuff is way better in person than it is remotely. I think the reason that hybrid works really well for AirDNA is in part because from the very beginning, we've had two offices. We have an office in Denver and we have an office in Spain. And many teams who work very closely together have split teams across the Denver and Barcelona offices, and also work with others who are not based in either of those places and are fully remote. So what I think makes it work is we do get together in person when we can. I go to the Denver office, go to the Barcelona office. We have mechanisms for people to travel between the offices, kind of one-off, or for things like our sales kickoff, to get the entire sales team together. But I think part of the other reason that hybrid is working well for us is we have set up certain just ways of working and norms to make it work because we already had that office structure. So as one example, I think one of the things that is the weirdest when you have people in person and other people who are dialed in is when a group of people are sitting together in a conference room all in person, and then there's a couple floating heads on the TV screen. So one of the norms that we have at AirDNA is even if you're sitting with everyone in the conference room, you still log on to the Zoom call individually so that your face is also up there to kind of equalize that experience. So we do things like that because I think for being attractive to the best talent, as everybody I think mentioned, you have to have some flexibility, but I think it actually is working well for us because we get access to the best talent. Our employees love a hybrid work environment, and we've put in place some of the things that I think make it work better than on the surface if you were just set up to kind of optimize for in-person.
Yeah, so it sounds like hybrid's kind of the best of both worlds, with not having to limit the talent, and like Matt said, fight that fight of getting everyone in the office, but still having that. I don't know. I miss the in-person stuff. I definitely my friends can tell when I've been locked in my office way too long. So it's definitely one of those things I think really makes a difference in culture and overall productivity. But really quickly, shameless shout out to you, Steve. You got third out of 1,500 startups in Canada and Forbes for culture and all that. And I think that's a big accomplishment. That's huge. 1,500 startups and you're third.
That's awesome.
Especially recognized by Forbes. It sounds like that can't be done just being remote. Like you have that 80% in office. Yeah.
You know what? I don't know. I mean, I think it's hard to get people to talk your company up to external people if they don't. I think it must play into it for sure. I mean, honestly, I love that point that Demi just made around like everyone logging in. Like, if there's one thing I've learned today, I think that's an amazing thing. Just to kind of equalize the room and stuff, because I sometimes feel it's like us and them if they're not, necessarily in the office. So that kind of kills that off. That was super cool. Yeah, listen, I think it was great for us. Obviously, it helps attract talent. It does, it helps in all these kind of things that you can't really. It's hard to put a number behind it, but it's something that we want to continue to work on. And I don't think we've necessarily gotten it completely right, but I think it's, again, and I think this was the point that Matt made, is like, as CEOs, especially like where most of our companies are in terms of our growth trajectory, like it's all about the people at this point. Like I spend 80% of my time now, like literally either looking on LinkedIn for new people, or like it's like my job is to now move the pieces around the chessboard as much as it is to like, you know, do anything else with my day-to-day, because it's people that power the business, and it's the people that set the business up for success. So like invest in the people. And so anything I can do, or I think that we can do as CEOs to do that is going to be just a net gain for our businesses.
I wish I had more than just an hour, and I obviously wish I could just have you guys on for another 2 hours to geek out about all the other things that may not have been able to be covered. So maybe, I don't know, if you guys are open for it, and for all the listeners, if you guys want a part 2, we get a round 2 going in the near future. But thank you guys so much for taking the time to jump on and to share some of the insider secrets that I know I'm going to be taking notes of and applying and going to be sharing throughout. But I want to make sure you guys get those, you know, those shameless plugs and shout outs for all the listeners that are tuning in. I'm going to link everything in the show notes for you guys, specifically to your websites, your LinkedIn profiles. But if you had one place to send anyone listening that maybe had more questions about something you said, etc., where would they go? And we'll go ahead and start with David, and we'll work our way through to Steve.
Download the app, go to whimstay.com, get your deal.
Yeah, questions for me, LinkedIn. I respond really quickly, and I love LinkedIn. I think it's a great place from a business standpoint, to meet people. So please reach out to me. I'd love to chat. I'm sure I'm going to get a bunch of hate mail about my position on remote work, so that'll be fun.
We won't cancel you this soon, Matt.
Thank you.
We'll give you a little bit more.
God, he had such potential.
What about you, Demi?
AirDNA.co, not .com. Don't get confused. I wish.
Yep. Easy. One day we'll get
the
.com.
I think we're one of AirDNA's newest customers, so I can back up. It's an amazing company. Stoked to work with Demi and her team. We're Operto.com, OPERTO.com. Automation for your property management companies.
Yep, and I use almost every one of you. Matt, we need to talk and get you guys implemented into our management company, but every single one of you guys are awesome. I love the products. I love the design. I love the teams. So thank you again so much for taking time to be on this roundtable, to go through my rambles sometimes, and you know, Steve, for being the butt of my jokes. I appreciate you receiving that all the time. You guys are great troopers. And for all the listeners, make sure you like and subscribe to everybody on this panel. They're amazing leaders and experts in our industry that I think we could all learn from, and as we're continuing to learn and build in this industry. So outside of that, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next roundtable and next episode.
Thanks, Will.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our show partners for making Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, possible. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we would love to connect with you outside of the podcast. So you can follow us on all of our social media channels for daily hospitality content, or find us on slicktalkthepodcast.com. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and we will see you guys all again next week.